If you're watching this lesson, you should have already mapped out your entire story. In this lesson, we're going to help you to get started. So where do you start? How do you start writing a narrative or a story? Well, there are two things that we know that great writers do. Number one, great narrative writers start writing in the moment. They don't give us tons and tons of boring backstory. They start right in the moment, right in the middle of the action. And then number two, great writers are going to create a mood or a feeling at the beginning of their story. And they're going to do that through their description of the setting. Your goal today is just to write the beginning of your story. You're going to write just to your inciting moment. Your inciting moment is that moment that starts the conflict. It's right here on your plot map. So you're just writing the very beginning of your story. So let's get started. We are going to start writing today in the moment. We have actually already learned this technique. We learned 4 different steps, but I want to focus today on just 3. Number 1, you're going to imagine yourself in the moment. I want you to imagine yourself right now in your setting. Imagine the time of day. Is it the middle of the night? Is it the afternoon? Is it bright and early in the morning? Imagine the season. Is it summer? Is it winter? Is it fall? Imagine the temperature. Is it freezing cold or boiling hot? What does it sound like? What does it feel like to be in that moment? What do you hear? What do you see? What do you smell? So remember that my story takes place and my setting is York, England, and my character, my narrator, starting in the middle of the night, and she is walking alone on this cobblestone street. So what I did, it's actually one of my favorite techniques as a writer, is I went and I found an image of what I was about to write about. So I would actually encourage you to do that today. I went and found this image of a cobblestone street in York, England, in the middle of the night. And I imagined myself here. I imagined what I would see. I imagined what it would feel like to be on this street all alone in the middle of the winter. It's freezing cold. What I would hear, what I would see, what it would feel like. And then I started writing in that moment, right in the middle of the action. I didn't give any backstory. I started right there in that moment. And I wrote in first person. I am going to encourage everyone to write in first person. Use first person pronouns like I and my. It is so much easier to stay writing in the moment. If you want to take a risk and write in third person, go for it. But I am going to always encourage you to write in first person. So let's look at the beginning of my story. I tiptoed out of the hotel lobby and stepped out on the cobblestone street. Notice that I'm starting with these action verbs like tiptoed and stepped. I'm starting right in the moment. I'm not telling you about my plan to go to the graveyard and to find this grave. I'm starting right in the middle of the action. I also want you to notice that I'm using first person pronouns like I and my. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I want you to make sure today that you are starting to write right in the moment, right in the middle of the action. And then number 2, you're going to create a mood or a feeling at the beginning of your story. Mood is actually a literary term that you haven't learned yet. Mood is the feeling that is created in a reader. So if we look at this image of the fields of sunflowers and we read what I wrote, I could feel the warmth of the sun on my cheeks as I walked among the sunflowers. Their bright yellow leaves danced in the warm summer breeze. As a reader, I am feeling happy. I'm feeling joyful. Maybe I'm feeling at peace. Those are all moods. That's the feeling that is created. Joy, happiness, peacefulness. If we look at this image in contrast of a dark, frightening forest, And we read what I wrote. I stepped hesitantly onto the trail. The fog was so thick that I could barely see what was up ahead. The skinny limbs of the trees created dark, winding shadows along the trail. The way that I describe this setting makes me, as the reader, feel kind of eerie or unsettled or nervous, right? Those are all moods. The mood might be eerie or frightening or scary or dark even. That's the feeling that is created in the reader. And the way that we're going to create that feeling in the reader is through how we describe this setting. So let's look at how I do that. And we're going to look at some of the descriptions of the setting that I use. And again, I am always going to pull images that are going to help me to describe what I see. So I'm starting on this cobblestone road in the middle of the night. I tiptoed out of the hotel lobby and stepped out on the cobblestone street, right? That description of the setting paints a picture for the reader. It was past midnight. So the street was eerily empty. I don't just say that it was empty, I say that it was eerily empty. The only sound I could hear was the tap of my boots on the cold cobblestones. The street was lined with tiny brick shops. Right? I'm describing the setting. Each one brightly painted, hobbit-sized door and a wooden sign hanging out front. The top halves of several of the shops stuck out further than the bottom, which created the illusion the street was getting narrower. I couldn't help but feel like the buildings were closing in on me as I walked. At the end of the street sat York's enormous Gothic cathedral. Okay, so I went and I found an image of my Gothic cathedral because I wanted to be able to describe it. York Minster. We visited earlier that day, yet seeing the giant, jagged spires backlit by the moon gave me pause. Could I really go through with this, I thought? So I was really intentional about choosing descriptions as I described my setting that made the reader feel kind of eerie or creepy. I wanted to give off that vibe or that feeling. So I use things like eerily empty or the tap of my boots on the cold cobblestone. Or even the image of the shops, right? That how the shops, they actually do like hang over, right? And they do give the illusion that the street is getting narrower. But the description that I have here, like the buildings were closing in on me as I walked, I wanted to create that feeling in the reader that something is scary, that something is eerie or weird about this moment. Or the giant, jagged spires backlit by the moon. I wanted to create that feeling that this is a really unsettling or eerie or creepy moment. So here's your job today. You're going to start writing your story, and I want you to start writing in the moment, right in the middle of the action. I want you to decide, sorry, I spelled that wrong. I want you to decide what you want the mood or feeling of your story to be. Describe the setting using details that create that mood or that feeling. Really paint a picture for us. Imagine that you're there in that moment. Describe it for us. I encourage you to go find images online. Even if you can't find the actual setting, if you're writing about somewhere totally fictional, go find images that are going to help you to describe all of those details. Really paint a picture for the reader. I want you to stop when you get to your inciting moment, the moment that starts the conflict, and I want you to go back and I want you to read what you've written so far. Okay, get started.